Hello?
Can you all hear me? No, you can't? Okay, it sounds like it's on. Okay. All right, so welcome everybody. Welcome to RightsCon 2018. Welcome to Toronto. If you traveled here from a faraway, magical place, welcome to Canada. All the best to you for the conference, and enjoy it, and I hope you have the greatest time. So the topic of our panel today is 21st century organizing, learning from the past, building the future. And we happen to have 5 of the most knowledgeable and experienced people to talk about this with us. We have, as you can see, we have Barrett Brown snowdening in, as we've been calling it. Yeah. So I'm just going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. Actually, just to expand on the topic of the panel. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Organizing, learning from the past, building the future. But how do we organize effectively for political causes, given that the world is a much different place today than it was 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, largely due to technology. So today we're going to talk about what works and what doesn't work, and what we can learn from everybody here. And not only that, but how can we use the tools of the modern world to empower ourselves and empower each other to change the world for the better. And with that, I think Barrett's going to tell us about a very important project that is being developed right now. So we'll get to that a little later. Let me introduce our panelists. So to my right, we have Naomi Colvin, who is the director of the Courage Foundation. Congrats again on that promotion, by the way. That's amazing. So if you haven't heard of the Courage Foundation, it's an organization that supports whistleblowers and all sorts of individuals who are being prosecuted for truth-telling and just generally risking their lives and their liberty in defense of human rights, freedom of the press, and the public's right to know. Beside Naomi, we have Jessalyn Raddick, who works at Expose Facts as the National Security and Human Rights Director in the Whistleblower and Source Protection Program. And beside Jessalyn, we have Birgitta Jonsdottir. I think I got that down, yeah? Sorry about this god-awful Canadian accent. Birgitta is a poetician, longtime activist, co-founder of the Icelandic Pirate Party and the civic movement in Iceland, and chairwoman of the International Modern Media Institute. And beside Birgitta, we have Thomas Drake, former senior executive at the National Security Agency. He blew the whistle on secret mass surveillance programs following 9/11, as well as multi-billion-dollar fraud, waste, and abuse of citizens' rights committed by the NSA around that time. Last but not least, Barrett Brown. Barrett Brown is a writer, self-identified anarchist activist, and founder of the think tank Project PM, and more recently, since his release from prison for doing journalism, the Pursuance system, which we're going to get into quite a bit later on in this panel. I guess we'll go right into it then with some of the questions and start a good discussion with our speakers here. So what I would like to start with is I would like you all to reflect on some of your past experiences over the years, whether it's within existing institutions such as parliamentary politics or organizations that are very top down, working within those, or whether you've done more work as a grassroots activist, whatever your experience has looked like over the years and what you've learned from that when it comes to confronting corruption and injustice in all forms. I'm going to start with Naomi, and we can just go down the line here to the right.
Sure. Thank you very much, Bailey, and I have to say it's a real pleasure to be on such a panel of absolute heroes. It's really cool. I thought that maybe I could reflect on what it's like running a campaign from the point of view of an organisation that really wants to make the most of autonomous activist organising, while also fitting it in a framework of a campaign which needs to fulfil certain goals with ruthless efficiency. So as you may know, Courage scored a major victory earlier this year when we successfully defended British-Finnish computer scientist Lauri Love from being extradited to the United States. Lauri he still has open indictments against him in 3 US federal court districts, and amounting to like a potential sentence of 99 years on allegations of being involved in an online protest that followed the death of Aaron Swartz. Even on this side of the victory condition, I could go on for some time about what a ridiculous situation that is, but that will dominate the entire session, so I'll spare you just this time. Lauri won. So Lauri's victory came at appeal. It's a really important ruling that came out of the UK High Court in February this year. Not only did the High Court accept both of the grounds which Lauri's legal team put forward, they also criticised prison conditions in the United States. They essentially said that the United States federal prison system cannot be trusted to keep vulnerable prisoners alive, which is pretty strong stuff coming from the Lord Chief Justice, the most senior judge in England and Wales. And they also moved towards saying that British prosecutors need to be more transparent in cases where they want extradition to go ahead, which essentially means I think it's pretty unlikely that someone is going to find themselves in Lauri's situation ever again. Never say never, but I think it makes it much more unlikely. So, a pretty comprehensive victory. And notwithstanding that going into the appeal, I was pretty sure we'd done enough to keep Lauri in the UK. I think everybody else was surprised at how emphatic that victory was, and I think that has to be explained in the pretty powerful campaign coalition we put together. So I'd like to just say a few words about that, if that's all right. So it was important, I think, with Lauri's campaign, it seemed important for me from the beginning, not just to win it, but to make sure that we won it in the right way. And there were a few things we needed to do in order to do that. First of all, there's a whole bunch of really quite traditional campaigning stuff. Those who know anything about UK-US extradition treaty will know that there was a similar case that came up, and there was a massive 10-year campaign to keep Gary McKinnon in the UK. It was clearly critically important that we established Lauri's case as part two of McKinnon, and reactivated that whole coalition that battled for McKinnon over 10 years to support Lauri. And if you look at all the reporting on this case, particularly from the BBC, always say, quote unquote, this is the first substantive test of the forum bar, the changes that were brought in post McKinnon. That comes directly from the language we were using to talk about this. So we aced the traditional campaigning stuff on this campaign. At the same time, we didn't want to oversimplify the issues. And there's an important point to be made about how you can be extremely articulate and very intelligent person, able to put your own case forward while still facing particular issues, particularly in the justice system, that come across as part of being a neurodiverse person. There was a battle to put Lauri at front and centre of this campaign, because some people were worried about it. They thought that the court might not accept the health issues if Lauri was shown to be an articulate person who could put his own case forward. Again, we put Lauri front and centre, and we were vindicated in doing that. Finally, there were particular arguments that weren't made during the McKinnon campaign, which really had to be made in this one. That, partly because of the time McKinnon happened, but also maybe because public understanding hadn't advanced to this stage. So this includes things like the US war on information activists, how this unjust pattern of persecution, which in this room I think we're all incredibly familiar with, and the stupidity of sort of pursuing, you know, the sort of futility of pursuing individuals as sort of the solution to, rampant online insecurity, and what sort of how that just detract from what are actual cybersecurity issues. So we wanted to put those arguments forward and put them strongly. In order to do so, it was fairly clear that we wanted the affected community to be able to put those arguments forward in their own way. So we made a point of allowing space for people to organise autonomously. There were several groups of online activists who really set the agenda in that. We created space for them, we resourced them, and we made sure that their lines were communicated. This slogan that we used, quote, hashtag try at home, didn't come from Courage. It came from one of these groups of online organisers. We facilitated them. We got all, we helped them. We resourced them properly. We got loads of stickers printed up and put them all around London. And by the end, the MPs were some of the 100 MPs we got to pledge their support for Lowry did that. We're using that slogan too. There's more I can say about this, but maybe I should let you hand on to the rest of the panel.
All right. Thank you so much, Naomi. Jessalyn?
In my experience in organizing activists, I don't know if you guys can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I'll speak up. I don't know if you can hear me well, but organizing activists, especially whistleblowers, who tend to be a very independently minded lot of people, it can be a bit of a herding cats dynamic sometimes, but usually you can coalesce around a common goal of, for example, meaningful and effective whistleblower protection legislation. But then you encounter the institutional barriers to that. The first would be the US Congress, where it's impossible, the US Congress, where it's very difficult to get anything made, as Bismarck once said, it's like sausage being made to actually see the US government at work. And Congress right now in the US is very divided along party lines, and those party lines are split 50-50 and have become even more entrenched, to the point that we have votes where the vice president is actually making the deciding call. So achieving reform in Congress is a long process and a broken one, and often you come out with something very far afield from what would be the ideal. So you have a Whistleblower Protection Act with no enforcement mechanism. A law that says you can't retaliate against whistleblowers, but when the government does retaliate, there's no recourse for them. In terms of the executive branch, they're the ones leading the witch hunt on whistleblowers, which started under the Obama administration, and he laid the groundwork of Espionage Act prosecutions of whistleblowers, which Trump has now taken up with equal vigor. And as much as I like to vilify Trump, it really started with Obama, including going after Thomas Drake, also on this panel. The judicial branch is one that maybe has some promise. The downside is it can take a long time for these cases to wind through the courts. I have a case going on petition to the Supreme Court right now for a whistleblower, but again, it's been in works for years. And so in terms of getting rapid justice in your life, there are a number of hang-ups on the judicial side, and then you bring in state secrets and other roadblocks like classified information, and that complicates things even further when using the judicial branch. So that is a reason to go online. We had, for example, a lot of good online pressure in the campaign of Reality Winner, who is an American whistleblower accused of leaking to the press information about Russiagate, which is in the news every single day, but even the president talks about it, denying Russian interference, and she's accused of leaking a document showing Russian interference. That, again, has been more of the online activism and grassroots activism that's been going on not only in the US, but also around the world. And we've gotten a lot more traction from that. I don't think a single member of Congress has uttered reality's name, ditto with the executive branch, other than to just make these bold pronouncements that we're going after leakers, even though, of course, the biggest leaker is the White House right now. So I'm all for trying inside channels, but in my experience, it has been people going through outside channels that have achieved more reform more quickly and more meaningfully.
Okay, somebody said that 1 year in my life is like 7 years in others, so I'm trying to figure out, I'm very old, I'm like 1,000-year-old. So I'm trying to figure out which angle to take on here, because I have been inside the system, like I went inside the parliament like a hacker to try to figure out how the system works and if it is the place for change and if the parliament is really powerful or not. And I have realized, dear folks, that parliament is not the place where changes happen. That's just the reality. And parliamentarians, they don't write laws. And so it is very important that we organize ourselves that care about digital rights in such a way that we try to figure out where in the world are there parliamentarians that understand tech, but most importantly, identify the people within the ministries or the state departments that understand technology and understand human rights in that aspect. Parliaments are usually just processing machines. They basically wrap a nice bandage or a nice bow on the liquid sausage. And, I challenge you, even if you are lawyers, to try to figure out some of these laws that are being written, because it's like in a secret Klingon language. And very few people understand this. So one of the things I try to do when I never want to get into parliament or politics. This was like, I'm a self-proclaimed anarchist like Barrett here. And so we had like this massive crisis in Iceland. And I had just been reading an article and then a book by Naomi Klein about shock and awe and how times of crisis can lead to very dangerous and bad laws. And I thought, well, it could also lead to very positive changes, because this is a time where everything is instabilized or destabilized, and it can lead to real changes. And for a while, there was this whole myth about Iceland really leading the way for really fundamental changes. But unfortunately, I'm a bearer of sad news that, the new constitution that was crowdsourced by the nation, and we had a referendum about it, where majority of those that voted said we want this to be on a basis for a social agreement. Parliament called for this referendum. It was non-binding, and so the Parliament decided to just, shut it. And because people don't vote for fundamental rights, they vote for quick fixes. So we can't really rely on voters either. And so it is very important that we have platforms that help us organize on many different layers to infiltrate places, to understand them, infiltrate the place you the least want to go to. Go there. If you want to change how Nestle operates, buy a share and go to the shareholder meeting and be the annoying fly in the tent. There are so many different ways that we can be changes. And it doesn't mean that you have to stay. So I made a pledge to myself that when I even got to that really high place in Icelandic politics, that I had the mandate to form a government and was a potential prime minister, and I didn't want to be a prime minister. It's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to power share and shift things. So you take that idea of power and you bring it into the parliament. That's what I want to do. But of course, that didn't happen because, we are still not, our societies developed enough to understand how to get beyond this fucking hero worship and this fucking worship of power. And if we don't get out of this mode, we're just going to repeat ourselves with different groups. So I created 2 political movements out of nothing, got them into parliament with the second, third largest party in Iceland. And people get, even if you're horizontal structure, people get so caught up in this hero worship, this celebrity cult that happens so quickly nowadays. And it is so important that we understand that we are totally and absolutely the circle of power, and nobody is above or beyond. And so when we create new networks to try to fight for these shifts and changes that many of you hope for that are at this conference, you have to, as soon as you spot any sort of awe for power, fame, or glory, challenge it or run away from it as fast as you can, because that is the greatest destroyer of a lot of these amazing things that we've been seeing emerging after 2008.
Thank you, Birgitta. Thomas Drake.
Wow,
you're up.
incredibly powerful words from Birgitta. It's interesting. I sit here in front of you as a free human being, and I can't begin to tell you how precious it means to be able to live free and keep your liberties and not have them taken away from you. I ran toward power. I was actually doing quite well in industry. I was during the go-go 90s. I was a principal in a boutique.com, was making a fair amount of money. I've actually questioned my own sanity several times since. So I ran toward power. I ran right into the belly of the beast. I dropped myself right into the mouth of the Leviathan state. And my first job title was senior change leader. How ironic. Was I really going to change power? And yet I had this sense that it was for history. What I didn't know is what would happen after 9/11. And a number of those here on stage with me, as well as those in the audience and those that are viewing the live stream, are well aware of what happened to me. See, because I stood up and I had tens of millions of projects under my control, I organized in a way where you were in between the cracks of the bureaucracy where they couldn't see you as much. So there was the formal and informal structures. It was my intent to basically melt from within those structures in a way that would make a difference and still have NSA beholden to the primary obligation, as secret as it still is, the no such agency, the never share anything, no secrets anymore agency of record, that there was a fundamental responsibility to the people, which was to provide with common defense. That clearly was not the institutional intent. And so you get into these social structures that we have created. Perhaps Pogo is right. We have met the enemy, and it's us. No matter where we are, no matter where we find ourselves, there we are, looking at ourselves in the mirror. And for me to even say what I'm about to say now is incredibly surreal, because not too long ago, in response to what I had done, and the fact that I had basically played David against the government Goliath, and was able to stand free and not end up in prison and not end up paying a fine as much as high a price as I paid. The National Insider Threat Task Force actually said that I was self-radicalized. Just think about what that means, especially for those of you who are more anarchist in nature, and I can certainly, since everything happened to me, identify much more with the organized anarchists around the world and those that are not so organized. What does it mean to be self-radicalized in a social structure that wants compliance, it wants order, it doesn't want people actually standing up, and it doesn't want to have someone holding up a mirror? It was clear from days after 9/11 that changing the system was going to be an utter and abysmal failure. And yet, similar to Brigitte, I remained within the system for 6.5 years at a very senior level, continuing through multiple assignments and multiple roles, and ultimately ending up as a professor, teaching of all things, leadership ethics, national security, information strategies. I pause for a moment because now I'm without the system. And in without the system, I'm actually more encouraged now than ever. Coming to RightsCon in itself, to me, is part of the silver lining. I've met extraordinary people from all walks of life, those you hear about publicly, those you do not hear, practically every corner of the world. And it gives me hope. If you go out to the primary social media that I do weigh in a bit from time to time on Twitter, there is a box, the proverbial Pandora's box. And after all the fears escape, guess what's at the bottom? Hope. But I do have one confession to make as we move on to the next. I know we want Barrett to weigh in here. So I'm going to take just a very brief opportunity to provide you a public service announcement. It's come to my attention that apparently there are those who believe that I am QAnon. And I'm here because I'm full public, right? Total transparency. I'm going to disappoint a few people that I am not.
Good for you.
But I do wear a Q. So to clue you in on this Q, this Q stands for question. But what does it mean to question? Question everything, especially authority.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Barrett, how you doing?
Fantastic, how are you?
Good, all right, you're up.
Thank you very much, and thank you for moderating today, really.
Oh, no problem, thank you for having me. It's an honor, really.
So, if we look back 20 years, we get a sense of how much more we know than we did back then. We know a lot about specifics. We know how the information age changes the nature of issues, the nature of the problems we face, and the solutions, that are now available. But we don't know a great deal because we're very early in the information age, historically speaking. It's a huge anyone can collaborate with anyone else across the planet, theoretically. At least 3 or 4 billion people can at this point. We know a lot more than 15 years ago. We now know what it looks like when people with no previous relationships come together and collaborate in an online space. We know what problems arise with that. We know what that can lead to. We know how people, for instance, in first world countries can assist in a democratic uprising in places like Tunisia. We know what kinds of assistance programs can be given to people in Egypt when their internet's cut off. We know a lot of specifics. But on the whole, we know a lot more about the dynamics that have come into play so fundamentally. And we didn't know these things 10, 15 years ago. But now that we know them, we have no excuse not to systematize that knowledge and turn it into something that will vastly improve our ability to do things that are already being done and to think up the things that need to be done in the future. That's kind of been my focus for a number of years now, which is why we're putting together the Pursuance project. Richard Johnston, of course, and a couple others in the room have been involved in this for a little bit now. They've contributed a great deal of their expertise as people who have served as office holders, as people who have had different perspectives, from the inside of the institutions in some cases. Thomas Drake, of course, and that's knowledge that that we can put into practice, again, to the extent that we systematize it. Now, there are people all over the world, here and there, like Thomas Drake and like Virginia Johns Dinner. And they have constituencies, natural constituencies of people who believe that what they're doing is important and who would like to assist them. There's a quote from a book written by the founder of the Pirate Party some years back, which I haven't read, but there's a line from it that really impressed me. He was speaking to an NGO, and he told them that your problem isn't the people that work for you. Your problem is the people that want to work for you for free, but you don't let them. The Pursuance system is a way to ensure that every bit of expertise and bit of knowledge and ethic, the will to assist others, that all of that will be harnessed over time in a way that does not require any group or individual to sign on to anything without knowing what it is. It's a proceduralism of democracy. It's process democracy. It's hard to go into why this is important here. It's something that we're still explaining to each other in the process of making it. But I would say that the focus here needs to be the focus in general. We need to be thinking about, how are we taking advantage of our strengths, and how are we going to evolve our practices. I mean, even the press, to give you a good example, is still operating as it did 400 years ago on a fundamental basis. It's using Google, it's using LexisNexis, it's using hyperlinking to link to facts and prove things, but it's still based on this old model, and that's true of so many other institutions, top down, the good and the bad. And it's been long enough into the information age that we had know enough, and we certainly know that there are more people now that are willing to try something new because they've seen, our alternative becomes more attractive. The greater the rot we see in the institutions that are considered to be serious and orthodox. So we know that there's a huge constituency out there that wants to work together in a new way to overcome criminalized institutional power across the world. We know from the last 15 years some of the ways in which that power can be opposed, and we know quite a bit about what specifics we run into, what problems arise naturally. And so we have a chance to take the good with the bad, minimize the friction that comes with mass collaboration, and maximize the output. And that's important. That's which is why I want to thank those who have been involved at this early point in Pursuance project, in particular Virginia Johns here. That's about all I have to say. There's a number of issues that specifically have been addressed up here that are very important, and again, they all kind of lead into that greater body of knowledge that we now have, and now have the opportunity to really put into some form of coherent action. But I would just emphasize once more, because this is so important, that this is a different environment than it was 20 years ago, and it's easy to overlook that because the internet came on so slowly and so gradually. And it's so often kind of the subject of amusement, and it's a funny thing, the internet. And when something is funny and amusing, sometimes trite, it makes it easier to overlook how important it is. So again, thank you all of you for coming, and please look into the Pursuance project. Please consider signing up, participate, and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much, Barrett. So here's what we're gonna do. Since we did have a little bit of a rough start with the tech, and we got started late, we are gonna run out of time shortly. So I think and you can tell me if this isn't a good idea, of course, but I would like to dive more into the discussion about going forward into the future, because I think everybody has kind of touched on some of the issues, strengths and weaknesses of working both within institutions and kind of outside, organizing more as activists. So maybe we can take that and just expand it into where do we go from here? And this can be a very polarizing conversation in my experience, because some people are very hardline, one or the other, some people say, if you don't go out and vote, then you can't complain about any issue, right? And then there's people who say, well, if you do go out and vote, then you're a horrible person because you're supporting like this messed up system. So you know what I mean? It's these, this conversation can get very heated, and it sometimes seems like people think of it in terms of black and white, one or the other, with kind of no gray area in between. So I'm really interested to hear everybody's perspective on that, and how do we go forward in a way that uses everybody's skills and interests. Pursuance is definitely going to be a big part of this conversation. I think we'll go from there if that's cool. Barrett, did you? I was wondering if we could start with you. You've talked about the pursuance system already, but.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that. Sorry to interrupt. I'm glad you brought that aspect of one faction denouncing the other for the way they go about things. You're voting, you're part of the problem. You're holding an office, you're part of the problem, and that's something I should speak to in particular, because it's one of the problems that is the most vast that we're trying to address here. So what we want with the pursuance system is something that will allow NGOs, people, Green Party, socialist parties, anarchists, reasonable Democrats do still exist here and there, libertarians, whatever, people who may agree on these overlapping issues, agree that they oppose the drug war, that they oppose the surveillance state, the police state, but who might break down in any kind of alliance over, some other issue that is not going to be solved, and thus lack that unifying power that they could have. We want to make it easy for them to come into something and work with other groups and coordinate and share information, share resources, and share strategies, while still maintaining their independence and not feeling as if they are being drawn into, the totally evil and irresponsible methods of the other group that they know is wrong. And that's a big part of this. Another big part of it is not reinventing the wheel and not imposing a one-size-fits-all system on everyone. An NGO right now, for instance, would come on the pursuance system, establish a very minor presence, very little trouble, and thereby be able to work much better with other NGOs by virtue of how the system is visualized. Obviously, if you run a group in San Francisco, no one runs a group just a few streets down, nonetheless, don't necessarily have any idea besides the broad strokes of what the other group is doing. And so you can't easily determine what your shared, what the potential is there for sharing resources and, playing on each other's strengths. With the pursuance system, you set up a visualized network that, with the exception of those that are kind of doing high security things and want their network to be opaque from the outside, will allow all of these groups, both formal, nonprofits, brick and mortar, and the softer, more jellyfish-like movements, to see each other in specific ways, and thus be in a better position to ally on a limited basis. When I mentioned proceduralism in democracy or process democracy earlier, unlike any institutional system, this is something in which at every step, every individual has signed on and agreed to their relationships with other groups and other individuals. So there's never a point at which there's a majority vote and some people feel they've lost, not necessarily. And that's very different, and that's something that's possible now that really wasn't, was not feasible just 10 years ago, because again, we just didn't know enough about these things. And so getting back to the issue of oppositional groups, that's something that has to be solved, and I think this and things like it are the best way to solve it. We can give people the option of working together while minimizing that friction, and we can, by putting them in a visualized space, make them see how many of them there are. And there was an old idea in the ancient Roman Empire. There was a proposal that all the slaves wear a single color tunic, so that they may be more easily identified. It was shot down because the concern was that they didn't know their numbers. And so the mirror image of that is, to the extent we allow people to make plain what they're doing and how they're doing it, and how vast are the structures that are built, and this is all visible to everyone, we do take advantage of that human need to know that others are doing the same thing, that their work is not being done in a vacuum. It's very important to show the ability to succeed. It's very important to appeal to the knowledge that you're not the only person picking up litter. Everyone's picking up litter, and so the litter problem actually can be solved. It's not just you shoveling against the ocean. And so that's another aspect of it that is somewhat unrelated to the previous issue, but I also want to emphasize today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. So maybe we'll go back the opposite way that we started to continue the conversation. Thomas, do you have anything to add to what Barrett said?
I have a couple of thoughts. I mean, all systems are social. It's made up of us, we, that's you and me. And so the intent of organizing, we know what doesn't work, and we know what happens when power is abused in social structures that are made up of institutions and various other formal mechanisms. So I think here we all live collectively on this place called Earth, third rock from the sun. What kind of future do we want to keep? What kind of future actually matters in terms of the highest and the best of us, and in terms of our health and well-being as a people? That goes way beyond nation states, it goes way beyond boundaries, it goes way beyond all the traditional things and historical things that have divided us. And so for me, it's much more organic in nature. There are many invisible webs and connections that are actually living in part inside this very room. And for those you may remember, I always use sort of these movie references, but Avatar, there was these connections, and some people poo-poo it, but those connections themselves between who we are, you can't really see, but you certainly know and feel their effects. And you know when it feels that you are contributing and making a difference, and what it feels like when you're not. Abraham Maslow had a number of things to say about that hierarchy of needs of people. And so I think part of what's emerging, and this is what encourages me, again, gives me hope, is that it doesn't take a majority. It doesn't even take a significant minority. It just takes enough who care enough to make a difference in the world of us.
Right on.
Thank you so much for that. Brigitte?
Yes, thank you. Okay, so I am, like many of you, really want to get off Facebook. It's really difficult. I miss funerals and birthdays, and events and protests and stuff when I'm not there. And I feel like one of the reasons I liked Facebook was we used it as a tool when we were starting to organize protests and all kinds of stuff in Iceland. And it was really good. You could hack a little bit so you could invite everyone, but then Facebook changed that. So Facebook today is nothing like Facebook in 2008 and 9 and 10. The algorithm is really fucked. And I really encourage everybody to get off it. And those of us that are activists and need ways to get out of our bubble, Facebook is not the place. So I am really excited to use this new platform that has been developed by people that are activists, that understand what we need as activists to organize. I remember back in the day, do you remember when they were like, before the Iraq War, there were all these protests all over the world, and was the first international protest organized through the internet, and we nearly won. We were so close to it. You have no idea how close to it we were. And so the greatest disappointment was that all the organizations stopped after the war started. This is one of the reasons I co-produced Collateral Murder, is because I wanted people to see what happens in war. I want people to have the images of the horror of war in their living room so that they never forget what it is. Because if we know and if we remind ourselves about some of these very pressing issues and horrors in our world, we are more compelled to do something about it. So if we would have had organizing tools like we're trying to develop here, where we could organize both locally and globally on different events depending on what it is. Like for example, now we really need to organize people in the United States because of net neutrality or the attempts to destroy it. And so, then we need places where we feel safe. We're not safe on Facebook. It's dangerous. It is dangerous to go into many of the social spaces because we are being mapped. We are the commodity. So Zuckerberg says, "Oh, we're not selling data." No, he's selling you. You are his little, social thing. I won't say the word. So Zuckerberg is a pig. Okay. And so, we have to find ways to get out of this space. And I see a real great potential in this. And I really encourage you, if you're interested in, participating and helping us shape this new project, to come to our booth tomorrow. And if you're really, really interested in changing the world, at least write down 3 ideas that you feel are the most urgent to change and bring it to the booth. And we're doing it physically because it's so easy to write something online and troll us and tell us to create a new neo-Nazi movement in Greenland. And now there's a lot of trolls here. Come on. So and this is what Thomas was saying. It's also this physical interaction. So bring us your ideas, and we will take the top idea and help you make it into reality on our project. And I'm sorry, I'm real difficult to say the name of the project. It's like a tongue twister for Icelanders, so that's why I call it the project. I am practicing, so in 2 days I've promised that I can say it properly.
I'm very encouraged by this new platform as well. We definitely need something like this, and just everyone should be aware and cognizant. Of course, having my defense attorney hat on, I worry about it being co-opted. I worry about undercover people trying to infiltrate. And I'm trying to wear my lawyer hat, but not my tinfoil hat. But you need to be careful and ethical with pursuing something like the Pursuance project. I'll say it a couple times, and that way I'll get you through the tongue twister of the Pursuance project. But it's very encouraging. I think this can be a really great thing, but also something that needs to be done mindfully, ethically, collaboratively, and so it doesn't suffer some of those similar fates of efforts that have gone before that have self-imploded. So again, I see all the potential, and I really hope this can be realized.
Thank you for that. Before we get to you, Naomi, I just want to touch on what Jesselyn said about infiltration and stuff, and I think Barrett might have an answer to that, because that's a common question that comes up when people talk about the Pursuance project, in my experience. So Barrett, I was wondering if you could very briefly just talk about how to prevent those kinds of things.
Yes. The answer to the question of how do you deal with infiltration is that we will deal with it better than the venues in which we used to work. Things like Anonymous, Project PM, Telecomics, a number of other groups that are less known, generally being less dramatic, worked in ways that were very easily, there was no barrier for infiltration. Aaron Barr, a federal contractor, could come into Anonymous IRC during the height of its assistance program in Tunisia, because it was an IRC channel. You didn't have to have a password. Facebook, Twitter, all of these things are easily harvestable. There's no barriers, and so obviously there are steps you can take, nonetheless, using other ad hoc systems for activism that do prevent that a bit. This one is somewhat better than most because, first of all, it's not content neutral. We don't just let in anybody. We have a institution in which everyone has a say in how it works, and it's called the US, and it's becoming the fastest nightmare. People have to at least agree to pay lip service to the idea that we are opposed to mass surveillance, drug war, that kind of thing. From that point on, we lose control of that. We do populate it first, and then each participant brings on other participants, over time. That's how it expands. And so there's a barrier right there. It makes it much harder for someone like Aaron Barr to get into this than it was anonymous. Second of all, obviously the end encryption. That's a step up from a lot of the things people are using right now, including myself. And then joining individual pursuance. Obviously, when you're in the pursuance system, and again, I know that a lot of people in the crowd don't necessarily know the specifics yet, but when you're in the pursuance system, you can start a pursuance, and you can apply to join pursuances. And pursuance has a lot of different levels of paranoia about who is let in and what they can see at first, based on how sensitive the work they're doing. Obviously, anything in opposition to a corporate interest, to any state interest, is a target. People doing a little bit more mainstream work are going to have to worry about it less, but each of them will be able to customize how they protect themselves and how they let people contribute to their project without being in a position, theoretically to do damage, accidentally or otherwise. So all of this was designed very much, not with infiltration in mind, but more importantly, from what I've been able to see, to diminish the difficulties that arise when you have large numbers of people coming together. A lot of the problems that Anonymous faced had less to do with infiltration and more to do with the erratic behavior of many involved. So we've tried to kill several birds with one stone here, and just give people the tools to decide how they're going to handle it, and always ensure that participants, as the basis of the system, have a full range of choice over how they're going to be involved and to what extent and why and all that.
Awesome, thank you for that. Naomi, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. I'll try not to abuse it too much. So we've lived with online organising for a little time now, and we know very well the power of it for many of the reasons which Barrett went over in his talk. I think we know the power of online organising. I think the challenge which is in front of us is not how do we get people to organise online, but how do we impose structure, and how do we make organisations durable? How can we build structures which can sustain 2 or 3 year campaigns, because that's what we're going to need in order to in order to create significant change. Pursuance is a project that aims to be accessible and allows people to organise in a structured way, and I'm all in favour of that. That seems like an unalloyed good to me. And if we can get activists organising off Facebook, the sooner the better. I think that's got a lot worse over the past 5 years. I think it now actually dominates everything, and we need to sort that out as a matter of priority. I will say a word, I think, about getting NGOs to use these kind of tools and to use and to make the most of autonomous organising. That if you sit in conferences, with NGOs talking about this stuff, no one talks about anything else other than look at all these online activists. Look at what they're doing. It seems really good. How can we have this ourselves? And what tools can we use? Pursuance looks like a good tool, which I think people can use. But it's that actually fundamentally this is more than about tools. It's actually a question of orientation. NGOs, if they want to sort this out, you have to stop looking at people as if, look, here are the people that work for us, and here are our supporters. Our supporters are people who we tell to do stuff which may or may not actually further our goals. Maybe we don't really know what they should be doing, so we'll just ask them to sign a petition or write or write a letter or write an email to their MP, and we'll send them all out centrally, and we'll harvest their data, and then it just annoys the MPs and sort of stops everyone else being able to do good work in the future. You need to stop doing that and start looking at people who are organising online as activists, as colleagues in their own right, as people you can learn from. There needs to be, they're people you're collaborating with. They're not people who you're telling to do stuff. And we need to once we've made that transition, then you'll be in a position where organisations can use tools like Pursuance better, and we'll work together better, and we'll start to create real change, because change is needed.
Awesome. This is such a great conversation. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you to everybody who's been listening. Sorry about the technical difficulties at the beginning and getting started late.
Where is our booth tomorrow? Where is it?
The booth tomorrow, yeah. So we do have a booth. Annalise, 1 to 6 tomorrow. Where is it going to be located? The Village.
And I believe that Steve from the Pursuance Project is also giving a technical
Yes,
talk.
I was just going to get to that. So definitely come by the booth, and later today, 5:15, I believe it's room 200A.
Yep.
200A, yes. The lead developer of the Pursuance system, Steve Phillips, will be giving a tech demo. So if you're interested in how this is coming together, definitely attend that. It's going to be really informative, and yeah, I see you all there. I don't think we have time for questions. I think we're at 1:45. So we're definitely at the end of our 75 minutes. However, I think that because it's only day one of RightsCon, everybody's going to be around for the next couple of days. So I'll just say, by all means, if you see any of our panelists around RightsCon, that's, I'm sure that they would not mind at all if you asked them any questions, or wanted to have any kind of conversation about Pursuance or about anything that you heard about today. Thank you all again.
Think about it. See you later, man. Did I?
I'm so sorry, we are right away.
Oh, yeah.
There. Go on the outside. There. Now we do friends on the outside.
Yeah, let's do
No, I've come to accept that. It is possible. It is actually possible to stand up. We have to hold off. Power, especially.
Bailey?
It's great to meet you. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for saying hi. Yeah, enjoy the rest of the day. I'll see you. I'm sure I'll see you guys around. Yeah. I just wanted to introduce myself real quick. Oh.
Why is this fit?
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So thank you very much. Did you tell him?
Claire, stop there. Okay, guys, can we huddle up and Claire?